from the chat saying, is Andy busy? It was so bad I put a hat on.
Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. It's NFL draft season. April is such a blessed month. You start out with the national championship game of college basketball. Really, the whole Final Four falls in April, followed by the Masters, followed by 2 weeks run up to the draft. It is just awesome. No NBA playoffs this year to start in April, but that's fine because I am extremely looking forward to the run up to this year's draft. It is one of the more fun and exciting drafts that I can remember in the last 4 or 5 years. The uncertainty feels broader than ever. Andy didn't really have any hot takes for the draft, so we had to go reach out and find a true expert here to try to help give us some insight.
I feel like every year we try to do this, and then I try to just stop you once we get to like 7 or 8. It's like, how do you even do it? Once you get to like 7 or 8 things, there's a million different butterfly effects. It goes in different ways. Last year, Drew and I made our own first round mocks. My God.
Very, very good.
My God.
Very, very good.
Very, very difficult. It's like dumping 8 different 1,000-piece puzzles together and trying to work that out. Cause it's like, I found all the edge pieces, and that's like the first 3 picks. And then from there, it's like, oh shit, I used up all my wide receivers. What am I doing here? Like we're done. I'm done. It took me like 4 hours to put one together, and it was terrible.
No, it was great. Our drafts were solid last year, man. You're crazy.
I know, but I just feel mine was better than yours, to be fair.
No, we're gonna have to check the scorecard on that.
We will make mocks again.
But without further ado, let's introduce our guest. Joining us today to help break down some of the macro, important things that go into handicapping this draft, and then even beyond that, some of the micro, what should a team do with this pick? What will they do with this pick? How can we find value in the limited props that are available? To help us do all this, we welcome senior NFL analyst, senior contributor,
senior college technically, but you end up doing when you're the draft, it's everything. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Senior contributor to the Draft Network, Mr. Benjamin Solak, rising superstar, really, in the NFL media landscape. Really analytical guru.
Big analytics guy.
Big analytics guy. Yeah, welcome to the Deep Dive. It's great to have you on, and can't wait to pick your brain on some of the NFL draft experience so far. How's it been this year? Has it been kind of a good year overall?
Yeah, I think that overall, like with everything, like we're looking at over a year of the pandemic now, people still reading about football all the way through. So thank God for that, number one. And then the league, found a way to pull off medical testing. They found a way to pull off athletic testing. They found a way to pull off games, and they're going to have the draft for the second year. And there's much more degrees of normalcy in draft coverage as opposed to some other niche NFL coverages. So in general, you got to be pleased with what we're able to do. Process is weird, but it makes it kind of fun to talk about too as well. It's a little bit fresh.
As far as the Draft Network, I mean, kind of a 2-part question. If you want to tell people what you do over there, and also I question personally mine, with your ascension into being a power player in the world of, college football analytics and draft analytics, is that why your avatar on Twitter has been cropped up a little to just include, not as low? I feel like that picture used to go lower.
It went lower. The full picture was online, and Mina Kimes, who works for ESPN, basically was probably a couple years ago, was like, if you crop it, said the nipples in your profile pic, which is plainly what it was. She said, I'll follow you. And I was like, yeah, that's a fair price. And so it was up there for a while, full shirtless. My mother was not pleased. Wasn't a fan of that one. And then eventually I had work gave me an official headshot. I put it up and I was like, no, I'm going back. But yeah, that John Lennon photo with the glasses is about as cool as I've ever looked. It's just been downhill from there. So that's a fun photo. Definitely when I have takes people don't like, they can't believe that other people are listening to a guy that looks like that. And so I enjoy those comments as well. But no, the Draft Network's about 3 years old, August 2018. So this is our third draft. And quite simply, it was a lot of places did draft coverage 4 or 5 months of the year with 1 or 2 guys. And it was, good enough. But as this has gone on, as more and more prospect cut-ups get on YouTube, right, as the process becomes more exposed and fans can find, like, all right, this 5th-round linebacker from Temple that my team drafted, I can go watch 3 of his games right now. They started to have opinions, and they wanted experts to point to. They wanted resources from which to learn. And that's where guys like Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, who I worked for a couple of years and now work with at the Draft Network, they started doing their stuff. We have an ex-scout, NFL scout, Dre Harris, on our staff, who he's now in the media side of things. We wanted to make that space to say, all right, 12 months of the year, we're going to do this. You know what I mean? Like, right now in the Slack channels, we're like, okay, how are we going to divide up 2022 scouting? It's like 2022 scouting. I want to go to bed, but that's what it is. You know what I mean? In May we get started. And so for people who really enjoy the process of learning more about the game by watching college players and trying to project their pro fit, which is a really fun way to learn about both sports, we're in a good spot. You know what I mean? We have a lot of resources. We have the mock draft machine where you can make up your first round mock drafts that you guys were talking about. So it's a good time, and it's been a lot of fun the first couple of years.
I love it. Well,
I like how you said 2 sports. I mean, just real quick, and that's just because it's American football. But we've said this a couple of times. It ain't the same sport. Like,
absolutely,
there's a lot of, and that's where we struggle so much. I think we're about 1 for 15 in the last few years for first round quarterback grades. We were high
the first question I did I did a college football podcast, and the first question I got, which was a great question, was like, how do you even figure out who the prospects are? Because I watched a bunch of really good college players, and then I learned the NFL only thinks 25% of these guys are prospects. And it's like, yeah, because that qualifying bar for I can play at the college level and be impactful to I can play at the NFL level and be impactful is totally different. And so that's why I say it's a good way to learn about both sports, is to experience kind of that stepping stone from one to the other.
Oh, for sure. We've had college quarterbacks win a Heisman and then get picked in the 7th round. I mean, like, there's been wild stuff that's happened like that.
Play in the NBA.
And play in the NBA and then go play in the NBA. Right. That's probably before your time, I'm guessing, even though you're a senior analyst.
Yeah, but I'll smile along. Don't worry about
it. Either way, I really appreciate your content because it doesn't have a lot of the other telltale stuff you get with draft content, which is like hot takey in general, which is just absolute nonsense. Like, there certainly have been people who have been stirring up like, God, man, we don't have anything to say about the first overall pick. Like, you make a case for, Zach Wilson should go number 1 overall. And it's like, stop. Like, this is disingenuous. You're not doing anyone a decent favor here. He may end up being, some other quarterback may win Rookie of the Year this year. But it's absolutely not going to be. Well, now I wonder who's Patrick's talking about. Oh, I got to go look that up.
Right.
But yeah, it's some other quarterback could very well win Rookie of the Year this year, but by no means has there been a better quarterback prospect than Trevor Lawrence in, I don't know, last 5 years. I guess just off the top of your head, who is the last QB1 consensus last QB1 who was a more sure thing than Trevor Lawrence? That you could
people say Luck back in 2012.
Yeah, okay.
So
Luck.
Yeah. Oh, Johnny. Yeah. People say Luck, so it's like 1 in every 10 years.
Yeah.
Which, I agree with. It's probably the case.
Okay.
Again, like when Luck came out, I was a freshman in high school. But that's the general consensus, and I think that's appropriate. We had a lot of quarterbacks go 1 overall over the last few years, but none of them were viewed as like slam dunks even at the time of their picks. And obviously several of them have flamed down pretty drastic ways. So since Luck, and I think that's, most draft coverage is at least a little bit hyperbolic, but that's like appropriately hyperbolic and not too far.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about some of the uniqueness of this year and the process in general, because to me, kind of standing back and kind of consuming the draft landscape, you don't want to go into it myopically where you have an idea of what will happen and you're completely ignoring people who have like close connections and sources and ties to front offices who are talking to guys on a regular basis and getting inside info. So reading the mock drafts, reading the analysis, I think is an important part of things. But this year, the consensus hasn't really felt strong. really at all after you get past 1 and 2. And even, through like maybe late February, you could still get Zach Wilson at like minus 150 to go 2 overall. Like it took a long time for that to solidify.
Yep.
And it has felt like this year, because there wasn't a combine, and I don't know, you've probably been to the combine, that feels like a giant important mixing pot where kind of consensus is sort of reached between scouts from different teams and general managers as to tiers where players belong. And all of that was missed this year. In fact, these guys only really ever talked to each other when they were at like camp, right? Or like at the pro days, right? And so it's, that aspect of this feels like it ought to make it more uncertain. Are you getting that sense as well as we head into just 2 weeks out from the draft?
I think so. I think that we're experiencing a much more intense, much more steep surge of information late in the process. And it goes to what you went through. We did not have the Indianapolis Gossip Fest, right? Like the combine is, during daylight hours, we're testing players and interviews and whatever. And then during nighttime hours, it's every NFL person in the entire world getting drunk and talking to people. And that's where we learn stuff from the league as media that comes through osmosis. Then it gets disseminated throughout, right, to everybody who's listening and consuming this content. So that process, February, March, didn't happen as much. In the same vein, groupthink on the road is a big deal, right? Like Bill Belichick very famously tells his scouts, don't sit near other scouts at games. Don't talk to them. Make no friends. Because he doesn't want them to, watch a good play by a guy and, oh, it's a great play. Yeah, I really like that guy. He doesn't want that conversation. He wants those scouts to have just their individual looks and their individual evaluations. Much fewer NFL personnel allowed in buildings this year for games. It means there's going to be less groupthink. There's going to be less crossover. This guy said that guy said this. So the information was kind of dammed up there for a little bit. And then the pro day circuit hit, and kind of now everybody's crossing paths with one another and having these conversations. So that's definitely plays a big part of it. And that's a very real thing. The other aspect of it that I think also kind of changes the uncertainty, occludes things a lot this season, is that, I always like to remind and talk about how the first objective for a team when they're building a board is to winnow. We want to take this whole pool of prospects and start getting rid of guys we're not even going to rank. Medical, boom, don't want him. Attitude, boom, don't want him. He's a analytics outlier. He's too small. He's too slow. Boom, not even going to rank him. So now we have a smaller pool of guys. These are the Vikings guys. And now we'll rank these players. That process is harder this year because you don't have access to as many staff members and family members to do the character background. The medical checks are being done differently this year, right? You're getting fewer guys in with your team doctors. So the winnowing process has changed. And what that means that is like boards typically look different. This year they look different. So we're going to see scattershot stuff. We're going to see really surprising picks in round 1, certainly, but especially when we start to get to round 2 and round 3, because that winnowing process has changed. And so teams are going to be a little bit more risk averse, I think, a little bit more arbitrary in terms of, all right, we don't trust this guy. We don't trust this program. We're just not going to take the risk on these guys. And that means boards are going to look really different. And that becomes harder to project on our side.
That's the combine stuff is so interesting too, because I think it was maybe 2 years ago, talking to Eric Eager over at Pro Football. And I don't even know if it was on the podcast. It might've been just talking with him afterwards. He got to talking about Indianapolis, and that realization kind of hits you. It's like, oh, nobody gives a shit how far these kids are jumping. That's not what moves stuff. It's like, it's the entire world. Just like
you can sit at home with your feet up 36 inches on the vert, right? But you're not there for that.
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. It's the gossip fest. It's the group think. It's the people getting together, swapping information. Then you see a lot of that. And, obviously not having that, it got weird. And that kind of leads me into the next question here with I don't know, all the stuff. And we have this stuff every year, but the fact that we didn't have the combine, I mean, I was waiting for the first sub 440 time, because some of these hand time 40s that people were doing, like the Penn State one was great. Like, okay, those guys aren't that fast. What are we doing here? So like, are people forced to take more of that into account? The stuff that people are doing on campus, or are they just been like, that, I guess, since they can't go see everybody at once in this winnowing process you're talking about, like, are our scouting departments kind of run thin on this because you can't travel everywhere.
Right.
You only have so many people. You can only visit so many places. Like, is that going to project a problem, or is that going to kind of give some tells based on, well, they just didn't even go see this guy. Like, they didn't have a chance.
It's absolutely going to give tells. The best anecdote for this is the fact that Justin Fields held his second pro day today because the Kyle Shanahan, the San Francisco brass, couldn't make the first one because they were in Alabama. And they could have been Alabama for Mac Jones, but Alabama puts out more than one prospect per year. I don't know if you know. So they were maybe watching some of those guys too. It's all right. Now we got to get up to Ohio State. They're a pretty good program. We got to watch some of those guys work out. And so, you see this second pro day being held by Justin Fields to reflect the reality of not every team that wanted to get to my pro day was able to get guys to my pro day. And that is radically new relative to other past years. Yeah. And so, you bring up like the Penn State pro day. The way teams figure out times this year is going to be really interesting because in the average year, like you set up laser timed 40-yard dashes at the combine, and then teams are still using the hand times they're getting from their 65-year-old scout who's in the bleachers because 30 years ago they had his times and they want to be consistent for their database, whatever. So, all right, we're going to take Charlie's times over the laser. So that's how NFL teams have always thought about it. Well, this year, a lot of it is hand times. And then you get some of these reports out of programs that Penn State for years notoriously runs on a 38-yard track. This is not new. Penn State's guys are always on a fast track. Iowa is the same way. These guys have always had very, very good numbers at their pro day. So you get these numbers out. Jason Owe ran a 4.39. Pars ran a 4.39. And then NFL times leak. And sometimes it's 0.06 slower. Sometimes it's 0.08 slower. Sometimes 0.1. And these are margins that matter. Like I said, teams, when they win, say we want sub 4.5 players, 4.491, 4.51. That's a difference that matters. And so teams are going to draft players and then call him like, yeah, he's a 4.4 guy. And he ran like a 4.38, but like that's the time that they had for him. And this is where I talk about the divergence in boards is going to be even bigger because now individual hand timing for scouts matters even more than before, which is just like ludicrous that multi-million dollar decisions are based off 65-year-old Charlie's pointer finger, but that's how the NFL likes it. That's how they do it.
Yeah, right, I thought maybe the draft Parsons as a receiver at this point.
Right. I saw somebody, Jason Owe, he only started playing football as a junior in high school. Somebody get this guy at tight end. He's 6'4", runs a 4.39. What are we talking about? I'm wasting him at edge. You don't need a skill to play tight end. Just go run. We'll see.
Well, the last wrinkle in uncertainty I wanted to bring up and get your take on, some of us like you and me, we're analytics guys. Some of us like Andy, we eat the film, right? Mm-hmm. But either way, you're dealing with a small sample size problem this year that is even more exaggerated than a normal year. We had fewer games than ever. We had more kind of imbalance in terms of like degree of competition, right? Like we still, I don't know if we really know, how to grade Zach Wilson on the right curve, just based on, who he played. And similarly with Trey Lance. And, oh, by the way, you only got one game from him this year anyway. How do you approach the fact that you have such a small sample size, either by analytics or by film on so many of these prospects, given that so many of these top guys took a year off and then, the schedule was shortened and imbalanced?
Right. There's so many prospects for whom that's like a fascinating conversation, right? Jamar Chase has an unbelievable season as a 19-year-old sophomore wide receiver for LSU. And then his quarterback goes number 1 overall. They go to put in some freshman who he knows isn't going to be good. And he gets an opportunity to opt out. He takes it. No reason to put any worse film out there with a less accurate quarterback who doesn't trust me as much. I'll just stick on 2019. Penei Sewell. Right. He gets knocked for the tackle at Oregon, gets knocked for maturity concerns and for, technical refinement and polish. That was a 19-year-old sophomore out there. We would not be having these conversations if he played in the 2020 season. We don't usually evaluate 19-year-old sophomores. We don't care if they're immature. As long as you're ready for the NFL, we'll be interested in you. Gregory Rousseau has 15.5 sacks out of Miami. 2019 freshman. That's unbelievable. Led the country. Doesn't go back for 2020. And the film shows that a lot of those sacks were opportunistic and not necessarily wrought of his own work. And so it's and we didn't even get to the quarterbacks. There's stories on stories of that. So what do? It's going to vary from team to team. And it's always about, for me, like degrees of confidence. I love Trey Lance on North Dakota State. You watch him play, you put 15 plays on, you're like, let's go. He's tough. He's managing the line of scrimmage. He's aggressive. Like, there's everything we want. I put on his film, I put on Zach Wilson's film, and my heart says, Trey Lance, let's do it. Let's go for it. But then when you sit down and you say, all right, my job's on the line, to what degree of confidence can I say what I saw from Trey Lance in 2019 against future accountants in the FCS is going to translate in 2021 to the NFL? I can't say that with my chest. You know, like we're not good at evaluating 3-year SEC starters. We get those guys wrong a lot. This is even trickier. And that if it's a razor thin margin between him and Zach Wilson, the guys Wilson played against were a little bit better. And the coaches he coached for were a little bit more NFL style, right? Trey Lance running that inverted veer offense, you know? And so you have to ask yourself, to what degree of confidence can I believe in my own evaluation? And that's what the really good general managers acknowledge and do. That's why, like, John Schneider misses a lot in Seattle, but he knows that in general, most GMs miss a lot. So he trades back a ton, because I'd rather just take a lot of swings at the plate and know that even though I can't be fully confident in my own evaluations and certain that I can evaluate good players and identify good players, if I get enough swings, eventually I get Richard Sherman in the 5th and Cam Chancellor in the 2nd, Byron Maxwell undrafted in undrafted free agency. And once I hit Earl Thomas in the 1st round, I have a secondary that takes me to multiple Super Bowls. So that's the approach that you have to take. It requires humility, because in this year and in other years, you're never going to be good enough at evaluating to say we can always stay put. We're always going to evaluate good players, and we're going to build this team through the draft. Hasn't happened in history. Will never happen in history.
This has been bothering me, and I feel like we've done multiple episodes on cognitive biases. Is there just the tiniest bit of, well, I mean, Carson Wentz came from that little school. Like, they can put out quarterbacks.
Sure.
Like, I feel
Easton
like
Stick is the backup in Los Angeles right now.
Easton Stick made it. You know, it feels like that's been. If it were any other like FCS school, I'd be like, I don't know, it's an FCS school. But this is like, well, I don't know, it's North Dakota State. Sometimes they'd go down and beat like
quarterback
Kansas.
factory.
You know, well, and for a while too, they were winning all their goddamn these money games. You know, the buy games. These lower end Big 12 teams are, come play us down in Lawrence, and then that wasn't so fun. So I don't know if there's a little bias there. And
they were
like
supposed to have
so
Oregon this year. That was going to be a huge game for Lance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The like bias awareness and scouting, which I studied cognitive biases in college. So this is like what I like about the draft. But biases and scouting is an extremely big deal, but it comes down to like, you'd rather fail going with what you trust, in the sense of coaches and general managers have other coaches and other personnel execs at other programs that when they talk to those guys, they expect the full truth, right? They expect a legit answer. Doesn't mean they're right, but those are the guys with whom they've had that relationship, and that's what they expect. Time and time again, you see those guys default to those guys. It's like coaching trees. You know what I mean? You can see the similarities. I'm an Eagles fan. We used to joke that Harry Roseman could not get out of a draft without drafting a kid from Florida. Want to know why? They like the Florida staff. Personnel exec from Florida went to West Virginia. Guess who got 2 players drafted by the Eagles in 2017? West Virginia. You know, we know people. And when we know people, we trust what they tell. We trust what they tell them. And so North Dakota State has developed a reputation. That coaching staff has since changed, and the reputation remains. Now, Lance is a little bit of a edge case, because he should have been recruited to Minnesota. And the fact that he wasn't was just unbelievable. Right. It's just terrible, very bad. But he ended up in North Dakota State.
Every sport, like Jalen Suggs is out in Gonzaga, and we can't.
Devastating.
And our star receiver is shrinking every day. Every time they measure this kid, he's an inch shorter. And I think he's better. He's better than Tyler Johnson. Of course, he's better than Tyler Johnson. I liked it 2 years ago. God, and this just makes me, everything you just said makes me think of something Drew and I said about a month ago, when we were just going down team by team and talking, and something came up, and we said, you know, there's tendencies, exactly what you just said with Howie and Florida. There's teams that like certain schools, or they just have maybe a relationship. They scout, they feel like they scout well, or maybe it's a bias with them too. Like, oh man, we got this one guy from this one school, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. So now we have this untapped bias that's making us want to go there. But there's there's a bunch of spots where we have new head coaches. There's a few spots where we have new GMs. Like, how are you treating some of those where you have very little information about how this team's front office is going to react? Because, like, I don't know who replaced Dimitrov. I can't think of the guy's name in Atlanta.
Scott Fitterer out of Seattle.
Yeah, like, are you able to take anything from what Seattle did in the past and transpose it onto him, or like, how do you treat that?
Oh, yeah.
Just
the
treat
new
it as
Atlanta guy, Terry Fontenot, who he must have been a great talent evaluator at New Orleans. Like, if you had to say who's going to win this draft and gave you no other options, well, Atlanta has a good chance because he drafted some amazing players when he was with New Orleans.
Right.
But yeah, it's a good question. How, like, and even beyond that, like, do you kind of categorize certain GMs and coaches based on, you know, what you know about them, right? Like, everybody's situation is a little different, right? Like some guys are in a very comfortable employment status. They can take a little bit more risk. Some guys have to get something this year to save their jobs. The incentive structure is not the same for a Bill Belichick and a Zach Taylor. You know, like, it's a very different dynamic. I mean, yeah. I guess how much should we use about coaching GMs, what we know about them, what we don't know about them in our handicapping process?
Right. So when it comes to the new guys, I'll use them after they do it. I'll say, that makes sense. You know, right. The two interesting guys are the guys we brought up. Scott Fitterer in Carolina comes from Seattle. All Seattle ever did was trade back. Yeah. Up until the Sam Darnold trade, we all thought Carolina might trade up for a quarterback, which Seattle got their quarterback in the third round. You know what I mean? That's not really a repeatable process. That's an outlier. And so we thought, all right, Carolina, super aggressive owner and David Tepper, they're going to go be aggressive. They try to trade for Stafford. They make the Darnold trade. They could still take quarterback, you know. So I wish I could have told you, hey, they're going to trade back because it's Seattle, but you don't know that. And then the opposite side of that coin, you brought up Fontenot in Atlanta from a New Orleans team that traded up. New Orleans said, we like our guys. We're going to trade a first for Marcus Davenport. Didn't work. We don't care. We're going to trade up in the second round for Eric McCoy. We don't even have a third round pick. We're going to go get him. That worked. That team also invested a ton in the offensive line. Atlanta's got a goodish offensive line, but it could be improved. How much of that was Fontenot? How much of that wasn't? Atlanta's in a great spot at 4 to trade back. New Orleans never traded back. What's Fontenot bringing to the table? Yeah. We can't, when it's new GMs, you can go, digging for nuggets in the pressers. But the reality is with new guys, it's very, very hard. So after they do what I expect them to do, I'll say, yeah, I expect them to do that, not beforehand.
Okay, so good thing that the entire draft pivots on pick 4 then.
Yeah,
if we have no.
That's a total nightmare.
That's the segue here.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's the thing is like you can use it retrospectively to help understand the decision. Like, it makes sense because he came from here. But right, prognosticating is tough. With established guys, yeah, you can do that a little bit more easily. Dave Gettleman doesn't trade back. He doesn't trade back. There's been times where it made very little sense for Dave Gettleman not to trade back, and he still didn't trade back. He sat there at 17 and took Dexter Lawrence. Nobody wanted Dexter Lawrence at 17. Dave Gettleman did. I'm going to make this pick. Other GMs are just going to trade back and still get their guy, get an extra 5th round pick. He doesn't do it. He believes in his evaluations. He's going to sit there and take him. So we know this. And so when you look at Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith over under 11.5, that pivot points right after the Giants might take a wide receiver. There's no way they're trading out of that pick. So yes, a team that might need a wide receiver will be there at 11. I can promise you that. And so that does help us inform things a little bit. But in general, you're throwing darts, and especially with new guys, you're throwing darts blindfolded, drunk, spun around 3 times. Don't try it. You're going to take somebody's eye out.
Speaking of throwing darts,
we've been sitting and talking about the 4th pick has been driving us nuts for all week.
Let's don't spoil.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I mean, the third, 4th, and 5th, and honestly 6th. Like that's there's a box of Hornets at each one of those spots, and it's going to be a lot of fun once we get to it.
Yeah. But speaking of throwing darts, how much do you care about your mock draft? Like, I would say that having a good mock draft was a sign of credibility, but then you have guys like Mel Kiper Jr. who put out one of the most ridiculous mocks that I've ever seen this week. He has Miami trading from 6 into 4 to take a positional player, which is I mean, it's fundamentally insane. Atlanta trades down from 4 to 6 to take a quarterback. I don't know that you can ever find me an example of a team trading down within the top 10 and taking their guy who was a quarterback who was available with them earlier. Like, that just doesn't happen.
That Mel mock went to a lot of DMs very quickly.
So this is that just because the mock draft is forgotten the minute it's published? Like, there's, I know people have tried to create a credibility system. They grade them, they hold them up, but like, the grading system tends to overweight what happens after pick 10, which is, as Andy mentioned, is super butterfly effect. Who the heck knows, because it's all influenced by what happens in the first 10 picks. I mean, I guess, how much time do you spend on your mock draft? Do you, like, hold it up as like, hey, like, this is a badge of honor. I'm sweating this. I need to be somewhat right here for my credibility's sake? Or are you just like, hey, here's my best guess. Some of this is what I think they should do. Some of it is what I've heard they will do. And, there's plenty of places you can read this.
Yeah, it's always a blend. You know what I mean? You're always going to, like, I've been told, like, the Steelers are going to take Najee Harris at 24. And it's like, okay, well, we don't even know he's going to be there. We don't know the Steelers are going to stay there. The Steelers could have a guy ranked above Najee Harris who they don't think is going to be there, and then he ends up there. So you can't say that. But it does make sense. It's the sort of player the Steelers would like. They need him. And so, sure, when I do my final mock, you'll see Najee Harris to the Steelers at 24. It'll be one of the first picks I write, even though there's 23 picks ahead of it. You know what I mean? And then if I have to change it, I will. And so when it comes to write that final mock, like, I want to have the best one at TDN, at the Draft Network, to make fun of the guys for a year. But, other than that, right, the work that I want to be able to do well is to understand why teams picked who they picked, how those fits work. I'd like to be able to sit after a pick immediately, like, not Trey Wingo, we got to wait till this ends, but like after the pick and say, this was a bad pick and it won't go well. I think that it's important to understand fit, understand what developmental timeline players need, and how teams are going to work with that. So after those picks are made, I'd like to be able to say, I like these picks, I didn't like these picks. This class was good, this class was bad. Prognosticating is, we were all there on April 25th, refreshing our phones to figure out who the Browns were taking at 1. You know what I mean? Like, if you had Baker right, you had a fighting chance having a good mock. And if you didn't, you had absolutely no shot. You know what I mean? So it's like a little bit, it's like it's just too difficult. It's too arbitrary, right? So I like to understand fits. I like to get good matches. The most proud I've ever been was getting Calvin Ridley to the Atlanta Falcons in the first round, like 4 years ago. Because I was like, this is the sort of player they like, and they have a decent need here, and nobody else is making this a marriage, but it makes sense for them. And so why wouldn't they do it? And they did. And I was like, all right, I put the pieces together on that one. That's cool. The other 12 I tried to do that on, it didn't work. But I was right. They were wrong. All those teams are bad. Atlanta's smart. They make sense, so you can't get too serious on it.
Well, and you don't want to be married to it. I'm going to give Drew a little shit here. And I will preface this with Drew did better betting the draft than I did last year. Even if you throw out that kicker thing, you hit more stuff with me than me. You made more money than me. You did better. I want to say this because I'm going to say something nice about you. It's one of those compliment sandwiches. Because when we were live betting, we got to the Cowboys pick, and you had become, you'd almost like incepted yourself and like, well, they're going to go defense, and we're like, no, like, and everybody in the chat was just blowing us up, and then and it was like, no, that, like, it's like what you said about the Najee Harris thing. If there's somebody there that they want and he's much highly more regarded and he's there, it's going to happen. And the Cowboys, like, after everybody in the chat just said it, like, oh fuck, like, yeah, for sure they're taking him. Like, they don't. They don't
talking about CeeDee Lamb. I'm looking at their defensive talent. I'm like, if they don't take defense, they're idiots.
No, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, no,
well, they love CeeDee Lamb. He's going to take CeeDee Lamb, and I'm like, well, no, let's play defense. We're getting a good price here.
No, you're 100% right. They should. They needed a defense. That defense was hilarious for most of the season.
Right. Look at where they are right now. They need a 10.
Yeah, look where they're at. But it just became like, well, this is Jera, and Lamb is there, and Christ, they're going to do this, aren't they? And you looked at the odds, and it was like, oh my God, they're absolutely going to do this, and it just turns into and then there goes the mock. Like, the mock is dead. From there on out, it's like, well, the Cowboys didn't take a defender. Now somebody else who's defense hungry is going to get, I believe there was an edge rusher, like I can't even remember where the edge guy went later on. maybe the
Caleb on
Falcons.
Chase into the Jaguars.
Yeah, Chase, and that's who it was,
Mm-hmm.
and then a bunch of corners and safeties towards the end. It just that kind of made everything wacky from there on out, and it just screwed up the receiver stuff. So that's where it's such a mind fuck for me, because as soon as you end up with one thing like that, it's well, Christ, now I need to pause the draft. Like, you got to stop picking so I can sit back down and look at everything again and see where everyone's at from this point. So that's where that's why it is so fun. I think that's why it's so fun trying to do it live.
Oh yeah, for sure. I guess other handicapping angles we want to try to explore a little bit. Should we be using free agency as an indicator? Is that a little bit of a tell? Like a team like the Lions, they let their wide receivers go in free agency. Presumably, they have eyes for someone in the draft at the wide receiver position. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not 7 overall, but they need some offensive skill position players on that team if they're going to compete right now. If you look at their depth chart, it's not good. Similarly, like a team like the Bengals, I want to get into the pick 5 in more detail later, but surely they have invested a lot of resources over the years in the offensive line in round 1 of the draft. It hasn't exactly worked out. They signed Riley Reif now. Like, are they really in the market for another tackle here? Right. How much should we be using what teams did in free agency as an indicator of, either what side of the ball they're going after, or what positional player they may address?
Yeah, so the Bengals with Reif is a great example, because Riley Reif is the sort of guy where if you have to start him at right tackle, you swallow the pill and you say that'll be fine. He's a vet and he's done it before. It'll be okay. You don't sign him to say, now we don't have to take a tackle. You sign him to say, we can take a tackle still and it'll make sense. Maybe we kick Reif into guard, or we can go and get Jamar Chase instead. And that also makes sense because we have Riley Reif. And so we always say of free agency, you approach free agency so that you're not cordoned in. You're not locked into one position in the first round of the draft. You want to have flexibility. The best team and the best unit to look at this for is the Raiders on defense. The Raiders defense last year was atrocious. So they needed a defensive tackle, an edge, a linebacker, a corner, and a safety. That's all of them. Okay. Well, they added Quentin Jefferson in free agency. That's your defensive tackle. They added Solomon Thomas as well, defensive tackle, edge hybrid. Yannick Ngakoue, he's definitely an edge. Linebacker, they had 2 guys in free agency last year, and they brought in a third. I can't remember who it was. And then at safety, they brought in Xavier Woods. Guess what? They still need all the positions. They still need everything on defense. They still could go for every defensive position, but they've given themselves flexibility. So now if a couple of those guys do have to start, it's not the worst thing in the world. So in general, teams are trying to clear their big issues in free agency to ensure that in the draft, they're flexible. So if you go in and you say, all right, like the Lions are definitely stuck in at wide receiver, they brought in Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perriman. And Tyrell and Brashad Perriman is not a strong group, but it's enough that you could get away with a round 2 or round 3 receiver if you need to. And that's kind of the flexibility you're looking at.
I like looking at it that way. And I guess we've
it's
never
not
quite
helpful to
gotten,
us,
yeah.
But it's how teams do it.
No, I mean, but it's good to know, like, if you have, if you have a proper way to rate everybody, and you can say like you're saying, well, this isn't the best case scenario, but it's not certain death that we have to start this guy, or, we have to replace this guy either through the draft or free agency later on, or a trade or something, like knowing that they have some flexibility. And the Riley Reif thing totally makes sense. I'm a Vikings fan. I know where you stand when you're starting Riley Reif. It is what it is. It's like, well, you could get away with this, but it does, especially since there is uncertainty in the 4th pick, it does give you a little bit of flexibility to do a few things. So I guess, man, I have a long way before I'm running an NFL team. There's a lot of complexity going on here before you even get to the draft.
I guess, how about even broader free agency trends to take away? Like, the free agency market for wide receivers was wildly soft. Mm-hmm. Like, not a lot of guys got good deals. There wasn't really a lot of demand. Can we take that as some sort of broader signal that across these 32 teams, that like these teams are pretty excited about the wide receiver class, and that we could see a little bit of a mini run in round 1 on wide receiver?
I'd say yes to the first half, not so much to the second, because that free agency trend is less about this particular class and this group, and more so about wide receiver classes in general. It was a pretty good wide receiver class last year. And there were even good things about the wide receiver class the year before. Next year's wide receiver class looks good. We're starting to pick up on a trend here. The wide receiver classes are good. This is what they are. And more teams are passing more often with more receivers on the field. These guys are getting developmental reps. You know what I mean? They are out there moving at the college level. So many more athletes in 7-on-7 at the high school level are getting reps at wide receiver. High school offenses are more successful throwing the ball. It used to be any high school game you went to, we're going triple option. That's not the case anymore. And so development has kind of trickled down league to college to the high school level, and it makes your average passing game better, which means more athletes are going to wide receiver. They're getting more time reps, more work in 7-on-7, and they're entering the league better. And so now we've got 5'7" Rondale Moore, who 10 years ago, the league would have been like, absolutely not. He's a running back. That's 5'7". He's going to go round 2 and be a slot receiver. He's going to be a gadgety sort of a player, but that's, he's going to go and be in that role. Every year, we may not get, 4 top guys. We may not get CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Justin Jefferson every single year, but we're going to get a deep class of wide receivers pretty much across the board. That's expectation. And so why are you paying Kenny Golladay 4 years, $72 million, unless you're the Giants? This is, not necessarily a market you want to be in when you feel strongly with the amount of receivers we put out on the field, with the amount of times we throw it. We are spread the wealth increasingly in the league, right? We have multiple 100 target guys. We're just going to continue to pepper round 2, round 3 picks. We're going to pepper mid-level free agents. We're going to build a basketball team of guys, and we're going to throw them all the football. And so that wide receiver trend, I think, is more indicative of like long-term what the league expects from wide receivers as opposed to this particular class. I think the only main free agent trend that is indicative of this class is every single team that could take a quarterback in this draft, got a vet guy, didn't try to get a starter. Everybody wants a piece of this class. This is a really, really good class at the top.
That's some Malcolm Gladwell shit there, though. The trickling all the way down to like, you could go to youth football if you wanted to. It's becoming a passing league, and it just does trickle down. And God, I wonder what's going to happen to Wisconsin. Not going to have Big Ten football anymore. What's going to happen to run, punt? And it's a better brand of football. It's more exciting. I do hope it does continue to trickle down that way. And yeah, it's so weird though. Like I've always treated free agency as more of a certainty. And I don't know, are there teams that have differing? I feel like there's probably a spectrum of opinions on that where it's like, hey, this is a free agent. We've seen him play in the NFL against NFL defenses. I know what I have here. Whereas a draft pick is a mystery box. Like, are there certain front offices that, treat those things a little differently than I just put it? Because that's kind of where my mind always runs.
Absolutely, yeah. So Louis Riddick was on the Athletic Football Show, and he talked about like free agency at a macro level. And it was a really cool episode, and I've mentioned it a lot because I think people should listen to it. And in it, he talks about how in free agency, you're really hammering this guy fits. This guy fits culture. This guy fits with the way we want to approach it. He fits our scheme. He's an edge rusher. He knows our defensive line coach, and our assistant vice president of player personnel went to college with his old, strength and conditioning coach, and they love the way he preps. And so we're confident about that. So this guy will fit for us. He will matter. Like you said, it's a certainty. He may end up being a starter for us. He may end up being a rotational player for us. He may end up just being a backup, come off the bench. But when he sees time, he will know our system. He will know our approach. He will be prepared. He's going to be good in the locker room. Bang. Draft. I don't want doubles now. I want to see if I can get a home run. And so this is where, I still want my culture fits. I still want my scheme fits. But now this is a rookie contract player. So he can be great EV. He can be great cheap on value. And I can really mold him into something special. And so this is where I'm more so leaning back into my stance and taking a swing. So absolutely, free agency, I want guys who I know will fill out my roster, will contribute in some way. Now my roster is clean. I don't have any glaring holes. I can go and I can get best player available, best value available, and really make some big picks that'll springboard my team.
One last question, kind of positional oriented and positional scarcity a little bit as well. Are we more likely to see teams swing for home runs for defensive difference makers, pass rushers, linemen, that positional group, because it felt like we had kind of a couple of years where there just weren't a lot of good free agents, and or more likely to see them go offense round one because those are guys that are going to be able to give you an immediate impact. Those are guys that are going to be able to actually contribute on their rookie contracts. Like for whatever reason, a lot of the reasons you mentioned, you draft a wide receiver in round one, he's going to give you production in year one. Right. And you can't necessarily say that about, as we just learned very painfully from a lot of teams, you can't expect that from a cornerback.
Not at all. That was the first thing. That's a really good question that I haven't thought of. My first thought was like, oh, round one corners are always butt, no matter how good they were in college. Always. Yeah. And right. And what typically the best framework for this is that in general, there's an exception that we'll talk about. Offense is attacking and a defense is reacting. They're called offense and defense. So a defensive player needs to have answers to all the questions. He needs to be able to respond to everything that the quiz might be able to throw at him. You don't know what's going to be on the test, so you got to read the whole chapter. You got to know all the material. And that process takes more time. So if a corner is going to see the field, right, and he's in the NFC West, he might be getting Deebo Samuel, who's built like a running back in 1 week, and then DK Metcalf was built like Optimus Prime in another week, and then he's going to get Tyler Lockett half the time, who's 5'7" figure skater out there. You know what I mean? You're going to get such a DeAndre Hopkins. You're going to get such a variety of dudes that the having all the answers to the different ways they play, the different alignments you'll be put in to respond to different downs and distances, it's overwhelming. There's so much. So in general, defenders have to have answers to all the questions, and that process takes a lot of time. Isaiah Simmons went to the Cardinals. Not a good rookie season. It was never going to be a good rookie season. His role at Clemson was just go do whatever you want in the middle of the field. Just go be big and fast and long. And that doesn't fly in the league. And so we knew coming out, like, he's going to be highly valued, but this is a guy with a long arc. Whereas, this year's freak athlete is Kyle Pitts, and there's no such concerns with him on offense because, all right, we're just going to find ways to get him the ball. We get to be the aggressors. We get to choose. The one position where this is different is edge. Edge, especially on pass rushing downs, you get to be the aggressor. Tackles are deep in their pass set. You can come inside, you can go outside, you can go through, you can throw a variety of rush moves. In general, you get to impose your will. You get to choose how you go. And that's how you see guys like Max Crosby for the Raiders get 10 sacks in his rookie season. Raiders just put him at a wide 9 and said, go be fast. Most tackles aren't as fast as you, and he was really fast. Year 2 only gets 4 sacks because the book's out on him a little bit, and there's always, kind of lulls and swells. But in general, edge a little bit different. But yeah, defensive players, they have to be prepared for a lot more, whereas you can get role players on offense in year 1 a little bit more easily.
Dude, Andy, do you remember Chase Young was 4-1 defensive rookie?
Yeah, he was. What were they thinking?
I'm not imagining that, right? He was 4-1 for defensive rookie of the year, right?
Yeah, it was up there. It was like 350 we got him at. But I mean, now that you say that, I mean, it makes so, because a lot of times you don't want to say like there's not a bunch of different defenses you're going to face. You're going to face different defenses every week. But again, they are reaction, and there's only so many ways to run a defense, whereas an offense is, dictating how the play is going to go. And yeah, when you're a defender, you're learning all the defensive schemes and then all the defensive adjustments, and essentially you're learning the other team's offense every week. Maybe you get to play a few games twice, but yeah, and then like you say, the edge, just like, well, no, go get the guy with the ball. Like you're just an edge rusher, especially if it is a passing down, you're not changing coverages when you're just an edge rusher. You're just going after it. So I guess we're just going to only bet on pass rushers for defensive rookie of the year from
here on pass rushers and linebackers who get like 120 tackles. Yeah.
Patrick Queen had consideration last year, even though
exactly. I had a bet on Patrick Queen at like plus 3,300, I think it was, because I was like, he's gonna get 110 tackles. So if everybody else is bad, it's going to him. He's got the numbers.
Right.
He was supposed to get him supposed to get him in New Orleans, but everything went. That was one I missed in the mock. I couldn't believe he fell there. So, that's wild. Boy, I just want to go bet a pass rusher now.
Yeah, well,
I want to bet rookie of the year right now.
I mean, just real quick before moving off this, who? If you had to say who is the best pass rusher, I know a fit's going to matter a ton. Mm-hmm. Opportunity always is super important when you're handicapping rookie of the year. But is there a pass rushing like just guy that pops off the page that you're like, man?
Yeah, it's Jalen Phillips.
He's going to wow. It's
Jalen Phillips out of Miami. And the thing is, Phillips was a 5-star recruit to UCLA. you watch, like, and this is just dumb, you do it for fun. You watch the All-American high school game he played in, it's like a joke. Like this guy's, your grandma could tell you that he's going to be a first-round pick. Like, this is bananas. He's had the injury history, and it's a little bit muddied because it's concussions, and were they really concussions, and what that process went like, and you medically redshirted. And so this is a winnowing guy. Some teams will not have him on the board. Other teams will. But you put him on an NFL field, yeah, you're gonna get some pass rush production in year one. He would have come out years ago if he had a regular arc, and so he's even more physically developed than a guy this physically developed usually is when he comes out. He's ready to go.
Got it.
He'd look good in purple. That's a fit.
That's a good fit. I don't hate that.
Well, especially the Ngakwe thing was such a debacle.
Oh yeah,
it was.
And then Daniil Hunter
he wasn't a good fit for sure.
No, Daniil Hunter just was like, oh, he'll be out for a couple weeks. It's like, oh, Daniil Hunter,
like 17
retired.
weeks.
Yeah,
yeah, all the weeks actually. Yeah. Let's dial into kind of how we actually see the top 10 going. I kind of mentioned either before we start recording or at the top here, I have a specific point of view here that I'm betting into. A lot of correlation across my board. It's going to be a great round one, or it is going to suck for me, because I have kind of stacked the chips in one direction here. But you have to this year. I don't think you have an option of really diversifying, because number one, there's not a lot of props. The prop options suck.
They do.
And there's still time. I'm going to hold my breath. Hopefully things, they come around and they start hanging more interesting stuff. But right now there's just not a lot to bet into. I think it's very, very clear that Lawrence Wilson 1-2, rock solid. I have a little bit of Wilson. I think I have minus 150, minus 175 to go number 2. So I'm a little ahead of the game, I believe. But pick 3 is the most fascinating talking point by far. Going on a month now, I think we've been talking about, or it will have been a month by the time we get to the day of the draft. Real quickly, Shanahan. They make this trade from 12 to 3. And like you said off the top, the initial trade was like Miami Dolphins, beautifully done. Like really, like beautifully done. The speculation at the time was, well, they're going up to get a guy that they know to be the future of their franchise, a guy that has elite talent, and there's no way. My initial reaction was, there's no way that is Mac Jones. There's no way. And then everyone with a freaking pulse, read an insider source, an opinion in the media space, notably Adam Schefter, comes out with, oh yeah, no, it's very strong indication that it's Mac Jones. And my two initial opinions on this, if that's true, if it's Mac Jones, that's the end of the Shanahan Lynch regime.
So many people are we just can't do Shanahan anymore. We can't do it.
It's the end, because the talent disparity is so great, and if you gave up that many resources for a player like Mac Jones, you've lost me. Like, I'm out. My general read, and the smokescreen theory that Will was bringing up, which we've been talking about for like a week
all
now.
day long.
But, yeah, and then all day today. But just here are the basics. Shanahan, obviously a lot of connections to the Jets. Shanahan, obviously very happy that the Jets are locked in on Wilson, because that leaves Fields available, right? If Shanahan gives up the farm to move up to 3, if he is transparent about his just glowing love of Justin Fields, given his connections to Fields through the QB collective, and just knowing this guy from being a kid, and oh, by the way, seeing this guy break ribs in the semifinal game and play through it when he's been dealing with quarterbacks for the last 3 years that are made of glass and can't stay on the field. Like, oh my gosh, this is a match made in heaven. This guy can make all the throws. He's physically tough. He brings an element of running, which I haven't had since RG3, but he's not going to, his legs aren't going to fall off. Like, this is a dream come true if I'm Shanahan looking at the opportunity to draft Fields. So I move up to 3. But my important thing, the key here to selling this is, we can't let the Jets realize how much we love this guy. We got to keep them focused on Wilson, right? Like, the only reason that they would float the Mac Jones thing is to make sure that the Jets aren't like, wait, who did Kyle trade up for? Mac Jones, Wilson, Jones. All right, we're gonna stick with Wilson, right? But if they're like, oh, they're in love with Fields, Wilson. Oh, this is actually
I
kind
like
of tough.
it. This is one of the stronger. Why would the Niners not be very clear with who they're taking at 3 theories? I've heard, because that's the main question. Because
it involves the Jets.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
tricking the Jets is not hard. You just got to tell Adam Schefter that it's
Jets.
Mac Jones.
Yeah, you still have to do it. Yeah, and Brinson, Brinson he's living in the church of this theory.
It's good. No, Brinson's concocted himself a workable theory here, and that's the thing is like since the moment the trade happened, I was like, Fields going to be so good, and then all the Mac Jones stuff started happening, and I was like, guys, like we can't do this. And what it boils down to me is Shanahan's given a lot of like quotes about quarterback evaluation. And my favorite one he gave, it was in 2019, I want to say, but he basically said like, in general, like before anything else, like, oh, pocket and can he run and this, that, he was like, you want to find one of 7 arms. He basically like, there's just like 7 great arms at any given time. There's 7 dudes with nuts arms and you want one of them. And if you can get one, do it. And then if you can't, let's talk about accuracy and pocket management and running ability and play under pressure. And, oh, I like bootlegs with immobile quarterbacks because the defense doesn't think that it'll be like all that is secondary. All that's sauce. If I can get one of the 7 arms, I want one of the 7 arms. Mac, even if they were still at 12, Mac is just not one of the 7 arms. Like that, like even if you love Mac Jones, like we loved Joe Burrow last year, #1 overall pick. He was not one of the 7 arms. Like he was just a good point guard quarterback. Fields puts it 60 yards on a bucket with 1 hitch. You know what I mean? Like it's just not regular. And the same thing is true of Trey Lance. Like Lance also has a stellar arm. And so to me, when you invest these multiple first round picks, it's because you found, one of the 7. I think it's Fields for him. That's what I expect to be the pick as well. And you've seen it was at plus 350 at one point, like a week ago. And I took it then for Fields at 3.
You got the best price I've heard.
Right. And the thing is I'm taking this because of the way the draft works, it's never going to get wider than this. It's always just going to get closer. And now he's at like plus 110, minus 110 or something. So yeah, I think it's Fields.
Do we have a take on this though? Look at that face. Look at those eyes. People zoomed in on those eyes.
There's one of him and Fields chatting. Like Fields got a big smile, and I was like, "This shouldn't matter," but I feel like it does.
Yeah.
Well, the face he made
as soon as something
Jones
happened
was doing his pro day throws, and he was like he looked like
not one of the 7, man. Not one of the 7.
No, very much no. All right. Well,
the 7. I'm gonna have to.
I laugh when I hear people say they traded up with an open mind. Like you don't give up those assets. I don't care how comfortable you are with your job. I don't care if you've talked to the Niners owner and he's like, you are the coach for life. I don't care who you take in the draft. Like, no, you don't give up those assets if you are going to then evaluate the quarterbacks. They know who it is. It's Fields. I'm impressed you got 350.
This is not like the Bengals thing where it's like, oh, we could do a couple different things. When obviously the Bengals didn't trade; they just sucked to get there. But like, there's no flexibility when you make a move like this. Like you have your mind made up. You know what you're doing. Yeah, I mean that's the people that are like, oh, it's between a couple guys. Like how would that fly imagine that meeting,
right?
Like, yeah, we're going to do this and this. And like, once we get there over the next couple weeks, I'm sure we'll figure it out. The real trade is the friend you made along the way.
An interesting thing to the smokescreen theory now is the one team that actually did do this was the Jets in 2018, going from 6 to 3 before Cleveland knew who they were taking at 1. And so they had their list of guys they'd be okay with. And obviously that did not go well. That pick became Sam Darnold. But the Jets once did the move to 3 with, no particular player in mind. And so if San Francisco's like, oh yeah, we moved to 3, we're not sure who it is yet. Maybe it's Mac. Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, is like, yeah, that's reasonable. That's a thing people do. we can buy that.
That's a thing people do.
Was he an ambassador yet, or what? Where were we at 2018? I'm sure he was.
He's I don't know if he's back now yet, but he's definitely back now. Yeah,
I'm not sure if that. I'm not sure if we can put him under the bus for that
one. Either way, let's assume Fields goes 3 just because there's financial interest from a lot of people involved. The 4th pick then becomes fascinating because if Fields slides, if it's Mac Jones and Fields and Lance are there at 4, all of a sudden Atlanta has massive trade they hold all the chips for the draft to trade out of that pick, because anyone else that's quarterback hungry, like you mentioned, has a crack at 2 very, very legit starters over the next, over the arc of their 5-year, rookie contracts. I don't think that there's as much appetite for Lance, even though I share your same kind of gut feeling. Like if he had played a full year this year, I think he probably would have been in the discussion for 2.
Teams don't want to take 1-year FCS starters. They're going to be afraid of them.
No, it's there's a little too the risk, the tail risk is a little too strong for a lot of teams, especially if you're at the top of the draft. That means you suck, and that means you might get fired, right? And so sticking your neck out there for a guy who's started 1 year in FCS, not really sure who all is going to do that. All that said, if the appetite's a little cool for Lance, and if the other quarterback available is Mac Jones, and we think reasonably he's top 10, marginally top 10 talent, I think the Falcons are stuck taking a positional player or taking best player available at 4. And the idea that that's not Kyle Pitts escapes me entirely. I do not know how Kyle Pitts doesn't go 4. Honestly, it's right.
So I agree with you here. The team that matters in terms of what they're putting out in the world right now is the Lions at 7. If you're the Broncos at 9, Patriots at 15, you're looking at the Bengals at 5 and saying they're not taking a quarterback and they're hanging put. Bengals don't really like to trade back in general, and they want one of Sewell or Chase. You're looking at the Dolphins at 6 and saying, all right, they were at 12. They got back up to 6. They're not going back again. If they did, it'd be nuts, but probably not. So they're staying. If the Lions at 7 are a legitimate threat to take a quarterback, which, Brad Holmes was asked explicitly, the new general manager there, like, are you done at quarterback? And he was like, no, we're going to look at the class. Like, we're going to, we don't just want to sit here with Goff. Like, we're going to take a look. We might internally decide no. We might internally decide yes, let's get aggressive. We don't know yet. If you, as the Broncos at 9, or the Patriots at 15, think, all right, the Lions really might go take our guy, the only team you can get the spot from might be the Falcons at 4. But that takes the Lions being legit on quarterback, the Falcons being willing to move out, and you really have to be confident, especially for like the Patriots at 15, because 15 to 4 is the future, man. That's everything in a bag of chips. Yeah, if you don't think the Lions have that, if you really think that they're either just playing it safe or they're not legit, then you try to wait and see what they want at 7. See if the Panthers want to move back at 8. See if the Broncos are in on quarterback. It gets a lot more nebulous.
What do we know about the Lions GM?
We know that Brad Holmes comes from a Rams team under Les Snead, that when they wanted something, they went and got it. No team was more willing to take a plunge. We also, they can say whatever they want about Jared Goff. The way that trade was structured, they got an extra first-round pick for taking on the Jared Goff contract. Right. That was not that was not just like, oh, and here's a throw-in. That was like, oh, if you want us to take that deal, you got to send us more. That was an NBA trade, right? And so, to me, there's legitimate run on the Lions at quarterback. Broncos is a change in the front office, where Elway is still in the building, but was removed from the primary decision maker spot for George Paton, in large part because Elway could not get quarterback right. Brock Osweiler, Drew Lock. That's legit. Patriots is a little bit of a weird one because they actually really like Cam Newton. And then the super dark horse is purple up there, because throughout this entire process, we keep hearing Minnesota's doing their homework. They were all there at Justin Fields Day today. And so it is very, very messy in those 4 teams. How much does each want a quarterback, need a quarterback, and who do they like? Atlanta needs that mess to force a team to pull the trigger. But just and of themselves, I agree. They don't have a ton of leverage.
It looks to me like Detroit is building for the future, not for this year. And I don't think that includes taking a quarterback and developing him this year. I think if you made me say what's more likely, they take a quarterback at 7 or they trade back from 7 and accumulate assets, I think assets is probably more. They have the kind of schedule that says they're going to have the first overall pick next year, so they can take a quarterback then if they want to. I don't think they're missing that calculus.
Like teams have done that and found some success where you can take a shot at a day 2 quarterback, and if it's somebody that grades out well for you. I guess I want your opinion on the Broncos. You've said this is the Elway thing was, I guess I want your opinion on that. Do you think Elway is truly hands off of this process as much as they said? And if you were the guy who replaced Elway, would you be after a quarterback? Because like we talked a lot about this. Like, Christ, they have a really good young receivers room, and
really good
having a
roster.
Lamborghini,
The whole roster
Lamborghini
is good,
and no gas stations. Like, you can't have that many good receivers and have no quarterback. Like, it wasn't even that much worse when they went with the receiver that one day. Like,
it's right, Kendall Hinton. Yeah, it's tricky. Here's the issue. 3 weeks ago, pre-free agency. Yeah, right. Like, that game is just erased. Kendall Hinton versus Taysom Hill. The tricky thing is, like, before that Kyle Fuller signing, right? I mean, like the Justin Simmons franchise tag, and they made some big defensive moves. I would have said they still need work. They still need time. They're developing Drew Lock, whatever. And you don't want to talk yourself into the Broncos drafting a quarterback just because the Bears did something stupid and now the Broncos have Kyle Fuller. You know what I mean? Like that's too tenuous. That doesn't really change a team's outlook. Right. What I go back to is we don't even talk about the Giants needing a quarterback at 11. And Daniel Jones has not done anything more or less over 2 years of starting that Drew Lock has done over 1.5 years of starting. They're both guys who Daniel Jones was a much earlier investment, and so that's kind of protecting him for another year. But I think the Broncos are going to try to do it another year with Drew Lock. Yeah. The always tricky aspect of this is the ever elusive and mercurial next year's quarterback class, because 2022 is not viewed as a very strong quarterback group. And so for both the Lions at 7 and the Broncos at 9, especially with a guy like a Trey Lance available, who you say, oh, maybe he needs a year to sit. How do you measure that against your Sam Howells, your Keaton Slovises, your JT Daniels, so on and so forth?
I think you let Minnesota go get their quarterback.
Yeah, you know who looks good?
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, Kirk. I would. Boy, we're right in the same thing. Kirk Cousins. Yeah. I mean, he's above average.
There's going to be some recycled quarterbacks on the pile next year for sure.
Although if you're Denver, you can't feel good about the last time you took a Minnesota quarterback and tried to run it back with him. That was rough. Right. That was rough.
You need to have that offense in place. That's where Kirk's been successful, and Denver doesn't. I think Denver holds. I don't think Denver takes a quarterback. I think Detroit has if you maybe choose Detroit at 7 or Denver at 9, oh man, Denver's done the work. We talked earlier about like guys going to pro days, making signs. It's close. My gut says Detroit, but I would understand both ways. I think the Vikings is largely just homework. I don't think that's legit. I think the Patriots are, if somebody falls in our range, we'll make a trade up. We don't care. Bill Belichick's extremely pissed off that Tom Brady won a Super Bowl. He'll go make a move. But that's going to be a draft day sort of a thing, because you have to see who falls to you, who's in range.
I got bad news after watching the Patriots free agency. They're not winning the Super Bowl anytime soon. Not anytime soon.
Oh, come on. Nelson Aguilar, like $12 million. It's a great deal.
He can catch babies jumping out of no. I forget how that all went.
No, that guy can catch babies.
Can't catch
unlike
babies. That's unlike Aguilar. Thank you. Thank you. That's right. Thankfully, it wasn't Aguilar trying to catch babies.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I know about Lions general manager, questionable decision hiring Dan Campbell, the head coach. God. So who the hell? He's a wild card. He could go anywhere. But I do think I do think they look for plugging some defensive holes or wide receiver holes, because that roster is so bad. Let's go back in and say then Falcons take Pitts at 4.
That's what I think.
If it's available,
if it's non-quarterback, it's maybe offensive line because of the Fontenot background. The offensive line's pretty bad, but Arthur Smith, more multiple tight end sets than anybody in the league. He's going to fall in love with Kyle Pitts. I do think that'd be the pick.
Plus, on top of that, like Pitts comes into the league, he's immediately the third best tight end. I mean, and oh, by the way, you see a dynamic tight end playmaker like George Kittle or Travis Kelce. You think that isn't a good way to build an offense? You're dreaming.
Or they have Julio and Calvin. Great system.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, Pitts 4 makes a ton of sense to me, which leaves the Penny Sewell, Jamar Chase decision at 5. Mm-hmm. Now, let's break down why the Bengals do what they do a lot of the time. It's because Mike Brown is cheap.
Yes.
And he has invested a lot of draft capital over the years with very little return in the offensive line position, especially in the first round. In fact, they recently just cut a first round draft pick that they had on the O-line. The other guy that was Jonah Williams, missed his entire rookie season, did not necessarily look like the guy last year. They may be questioning their ability to evaluate the offensive line players in the draft. And now here, we're going to lay out more draft capital for at this position where we haven't been able to find a hitter. And we, and oh, by the way, we just gave Riley Reef some money. Like, didn't we address this in free agency? I catch some whiff that there could be from the top down, like, nah, we're done with the O-line. Like, I know we need to protect Joe Burrow. I know he's an injury risk if we can't protect him. But, even within the organization, Joe Burrow has been relatively vocal about Jamar Chase. Like, is this a little too convenient? Because I could see this going both ways. It's too convenient from a narrative standpoint to put Chase with Burrow. It's also super convenient to mock an offensive lineman to Cincinnati so that Joe Burrow, lasts more than 3 years in the league.
Right.
It'd be nice.
It's like Kyle Fuller making us think the Broncos are now ready to win. It's like, all right, if Burrow doesn't get injured, how strong are we really on offensive tackle? And obviously that matters more, but how much does it matter? And how much you putting into that? I think it's Sewell. And what throws me off is this. Consensus Chase is the first receiver off the board. He's like minus 900. It's going to happen. The Bengals have in hand T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Now, neither T. Higgins nor Tyler Boyd are enough as individuals to say we shouldn't invest early at wide receiver, going back to what we talked about at the position. But in general, a solid 1-2 punch at wide receiver, you need to add more to that. Higgins is a good catch point guy. That's what he does well. Not the best route runner, not the loosest guy, but he's going to be great. Elevate to the catch point, play above the rim, which is what Chase did really well in college. So if you put Higgins and Chase on the outside and leave Tyler Boyd in the slot, I've got catch point, and then I've got a big slot. Boyd's a good route runner, but he's not really much after the catch. Not really a super juicy guy with the ball in his hands. Chase, Higgins, same thing. If we're going to live in empty, which is what the Bengals did last year, and we're going to throw shallow and quick a lot, I need guys who are good with the ball in their hands. And I can't really put Chase in at the slot because he's a little bit smaller and shorter and be like, he's going to be a route runner. He's going to be a slot for me now. I've already got Boyd in that role. The puzzle pieces, I talked about building a receiver core like a basketball team. You want guys of different sizes with different skills. We need a penetrator. We need a 3-and-D guy. We need a post-up guy. Right now, what the Bengals need is a quick separator. Yeah, right, it's Rondell Moore round 2. They need a quick separator, a guy who can get open underneath and is going to turn 5-yard passes into 20-yard gains. Simply is not Jamar Chase's game. If they draft him, it's fine. That's you're going to have 3 good receivers. We're going to figure out the problems later. You know what I mean? We're going to figure out some balance. It's going to be okay. But right now, we didn't bring up Auden Tate, who's their wide receiver 4, who's like T. Higgins, but even bigger and more no juice and more above the rim. It's tough for me to get to get an understanding of how the offense is going to find spacing and rhythm if Chase, Higgins, Boyd is your 3 receiver looks. I think they need to look more so with a guy with juice in their hands. And so for that reason, I'm not as gung-ho about Chase to the Bengals. It doesn't ring to be intuitive to me. Whereas Sewell is just like, he's 330 pounds, he's 20, and he can run. He's going to fit for pretty much everybody.
There was talk about him. A year and a half ago, there was people like, "Oh, he's a top 1. He's a top 1 pick." If there's not a quarterback that really stands out,
right? Because Cristobal went to Oregon and immediately recruited him, and it was like, this is it. You know what I mean? Cristobal starting at Oregon. So I guess Bengals are the toughest for me. But
real quick, if you're a Bengals fan, are you more satisfied with Sewell and Rondell Moore than you would be with Chase and whoever the best offensive tackle is at the top of round 2?
It's tough because both the round 2 wide receivers and round 2 tackles are both really good.
They're both really good, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine either way. For me, being an analyst, I want Sewell because I like building through the trenches. I think if they go Chase and get Alex Leatherwood in round 2, I'd call that a great draft. It wouldn't have been what I would have done, but go get your money. That's a good approach. Okay.
And then, obviously if it goes quarterback, Pitt, Sewell, then it's just
this Chase.
1,000% it's Chase. It has to be.
Which is why it's so confusing that they put Chase as at a flat 6. And I really would like them to unlock. That's by all means, if you're willing to hang Chase at 6, please raise the limits on that bet. I do not understand why.
Well, it's a free roll. It's a free roll. I can't find a situation where something weird happens 4, 5, 6 where he's not 5 or 6.
Yeah. Right.
To me,
maybe you can tell me if there is one.
No, his absolute floor is 7. He never makes it past the lines. That will never happen ever. They love contested catch receivers. He's the man. But when I look at 4, 5, 6, I can find 2 of the 3 teams are legit Pitts threats. That's the Falcons at 4 and the Dolphins at 6. 2 of the 3 teams are legit Jamar Chase threats. That's the Bengals at 5 and the Dolphins at 6. Sewell is the one where if he doesn't go 5, maybe 4, again, like Atlanta could just be like trenches, right? That's what Terry Fontenot's used to. Arthur Smith, right? They were very heavy in the trenches in Tennessee. Sure. That could happen. Like, I don't want to be locked in there because the new system and they're going to
non-zero chance Sewell goes for it.
Yeah. They're going to evaluate their guys, whatever. But Sewell's the one where if he doesn't go 5, his over-under at a lot of places is like 5.5, 6.5. To me, that's the one that I could see him getting to like 8 to the Panthers, and he could fall out of that group a little bit.
Okay. Well, let's not overthink it, because I mean, part of me is angry at the Dolphins for trading back up into 6, not knowing who's going to be there. But maybe they do know. Maybe they do know that the Bengals absolutely have a hard on for a tackle, and that they are going to get whoever they, and they are like, look, Pitts, Chase, we don't care. Give us one of those 2 players, falls to us, then we're good. I secretly, because I didn't like their trade, I want them to get screwed, and I want to see Pitts and Chase go 4 or 5, so that they're like, we traded back up and the best player available is a tackle. Like, why did we do this?
And I feel like the thing that always worms its way into my head is like, well, maybe they're fine with one of the Alabama guys, Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. But then Chase, Chase has never dropped in first receiver off the board, which screws with my mind. Because that
he went from -170 to -700.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been beaten.
Exactly. It's done. And so that's why I'm like, all right, so it's Chase or Pitts for them, and they're confident they're getting at least one of the 2. It's not one of the Alabama guys, whatever. And so, like, I'm with you guys. I do not see Chase anywhere after 6. I'd be stunned, and if so, he's going 7. But at the time of the Miami trade, I was like, maybe one of the Bama guys, and ever since then, I've been like, I guess not.
We haven't touched on it, and I have said multiple times, like, once you get out here, it gets wacky, but who do you think the Eagles take? Who do you want the Eagles to take? Is it if like Smith or Waddle somehow manages their way down there? It's like a receiver would be awful nice, but is it Horn? Otherwise, is it Horn? Like for sure.
Wide receiver, cornerback.
Yeah. So I think that you expect a grouping of at least one of Waddle, Smith, Patrick Surtain, and JC Horn, and those would be the 4 that they're aiming for. They took a round 2 wide.
Seems tough to get past Dallas, though.
Yeah, I will say.
Well, Dallas could trade down, though.
Yeah,
that's true.
Dallas could trade down, and also I would not be surprised if Dallas falls in love with JC Horn.
Really?
Yeah. So this is So one of the flyers I've made is Horn first defensive player off the board, which was like plus 700 a while ago.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is now. Yeah.
It's like 400.
Yeah.
It's not crazy. That's not a bad play.
What's always critical to remember about the month of March is that it's the first time NFL coaches watch film. In general, coaches are firing off takes and they don't really actually watch film until March. Because of the structure in Dallas, where obviously Jerry Jones has all the power in the world, right? And then there's Stephen Jones there. The head coach and system fits have historically had a little bit more oomph in Dallas than in other places, right? Like when they took Taco Charlton, it was because Rod Marinelli wanted, big-bodied, long-armed edges. And Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones, who do not have football backgrounds, were like, yeah, that works. And then they drafted a bad player instead of a good player because he fit the measurements, right? Horn is the sort of dude that coaches will die for, right? He's the most arrogant son of a gun you've ever seen, which is, they love it in corners. He's got the NFL bloodlines, which Surtain does as well.
Sounds like Joe Horn, honestly.
I was going to say, he fits, he has that Dallas, he fits in Dallas because of the bloodline, this cell phone thing.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Greatest celebration of all time.
And so, and that's the sort of thing where if it's Jerry, Jerry likes the showbiz. And so I would not be stunned if Horn is the pick at 10, even with Surtain off the board. Still think it's Surtain, with Surtain on the board. Still think it's Surtain right now, but that's a way I could see this thing moving. Regardless, for the Eagles, right? Surtain, Horn, Smith, and Waddle. They spent a second 2 years ago on a wide receiver. Ortega Whiteside was bad. A first on Jalen Reagor last year wasn't great. I'm not sure how early they're willing to go wide receiver again, especially with a new coaching staff. I think Surtain, Horn right now a little bit over Waddle and Smith, and then they try to hit the wide receiver group in day 2 because the day 2 corner group is bad. So to me, I think it's going to be one of the 2 corners.
Yeah, I was eyeing up that corner prop.
Yes.
Corner prop market was like over under 4 round 1, and I was thinking that too. Like if you don't get a guy in round 1, you're kind of effed.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get maybe touch on that.
Yeah,
in a
take a
little
look
more
at that
detail
one.
in a sec. Okay, well, I guess we blew by Detroit. We have no clue. They need everything.
Right.
They could. Are you worried about your defensive pick? Are they could they go do something stupid like, well, we need everything. We might as well get a great tackling linebacker like Micah Parsons to play off the ball. Like
Parsons is one that with the opt-out and with some of the off-field stuff, it's a not on every team's board. And so he's a very tough one, right? It only takes one, but you don't know where that one is. What I do know is that they have Jelani Tavai, who's already a humongous developmental second-round pick from a couple of years ago. And the coaching staff really wants to resuscitate him. So I don't think it's linebacker. And then they re-signed Romeo Quora, so I don't think it's edge. I think the Lions, right, it's going to be a renewed investment in offense for them. That's my speak because Patricia and Quinn was just, they just invested too much in defense.
But they have nothing to show for it.
Right, they invested a ton of defense. They left the offense completely in shambles, and then both were bad. So that's why you get fired.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. And then Carolina likely offense as well, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they were all defense in last year's draft. So eventually at some point you have to stop, right? And draft an offensive player. Tackle's a weird situation for them because Taylor Moton's on the franchise tag. They moved on from Russell Okung. So to me, first tackle off, if it's Rashawn Slater or Penei Sewell, I think they're fine with whoever is left. And if a tackle hasn't been taken, they'll be the first tackle off the board.
Okay. Okay. Slater over under that might be a betting range. What's his number like?
It's around 10.5. Yeah, since November, right? Which this is critical because it means it was scouts and not coaches. There's been gas that some teams have Slater above Sewell. In their most recent mocks for Daniel Jeremiah and for Peter Schrager, Slater went above Sewell. And so I don't like how exactly to bet that is tricky because again, the Bengals are the really tough team at 5 for me. Figuring out if it's Chase or if it's Sewell, but Slater under 10.5 is a strong one for me. I like that one a bit.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, there's no reason he's not going to go 9 or 10. So that's really 8.5, but you're getting it at 10.5. Yeah. And something crazy could happen. Okay. That's probably going to move really realistically. Okay. I like that. I like that look. We think Broncos probably take a quarterback, be it Lance. Probably Lance.
Broncos. If it's that, this is the spot where Micah Parsons freaks me out. Vic Fangio had a San Francisco defense with Navarro Bowman, big body, big time Mike, Patrick Wilson as well. And then they spent a top 10 pick when he was in Chicago and Roquan Smith. Vic Fangio wants his defense to have a captain in the middle. Right now they have AJ Johnson and Josie Jewell. Fine players, not exactly impact 3-down middle linebackers. If there's a spot where Parsons gets sniped in the top 10, to me, this is it. And we just don't know what they are in terms of how they feel about his off field and how they feel about the opt out and so on and so forth. But if they read Parsons at 9, I'll be so pissed and lose a good deal of money, but I'll get it.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. I got 2 last quick questions for you. Okay. Is there a player or are there a couple players or player fit in like late first round, early second round, where you see that go and you're like, okay, they won the draft? Like, I don't know. Do you usually do draft grades? Do you do post draft analysis of teams and how they picked? And thinking about it as, as the draft comes up, you're like, man, if these guys pick these guys, they'll have won the draft.
Yeah, your Antoine Winfield pick. Like that's why they won the Super Bowl.
Right. Tristan Wirfs and Winfield.
Right.
Bucks absolutely smashed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like, do you do grades? Not so much because there's some guys who give out grades and they don't give out D's, E's, and F's. And it's like, all right, well, that's not real. But certainly one of the first things I'll do is be like, these are the classes where I like the fits and I like the guys. And so this to me is money. The Bills at 30 getting Azeez Ojulari, the edge out of Georgia, is their dream. If he makes it all the way down there, home run. They need a Jerry Hughes replacement / running mate. He's their mold. Going to be great. Right after them, the Packers at 31. Brian Gutekunst is a big height, weight, speed guy, right? Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Alan Lazard. He wants big bodies at wide receiver. Terrace Marshall, to me, is the best bet to be the 5th receiver off the board, right? We've got the Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, and then Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. Go Gophers. Will be 4. Okay. Marshall to me is that clear 5, and it's 6'3", 200 with wheels. You know what I mean? That's like Brian Gutekunst would die for that guy. And so I think if they're going to go wide receiver early, that's going to be the pick there. That makes a lot of sense to me. Kansas City with the changes along the offensive line. with their need to get immediate starters at tackle. Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama, Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame. Those are going to be the players that you see prioritized there, in my opinion. Tackle is tough to figure out, though, because it's a ridiculously deep group in round 2. And so they could just be like, all right, Brady Christensen out of BYU. He's 26. So he's already like an adult.
He's got a family.
Right, exactly. He was just like, he tested like crazy. And so, you know what? We're going to make him the pick and send it home. That wouldn't shock me either. But if the Chiefs don't take a tackle at 32, what are we doing? It's Patrick Mahomes. I swear to God.
Yeah. Do you really have to do research? Can you just say like, oh, there's a Notre Dame tackle on the board, we should just take that?
Not only is it like there's a Notre Dame tackle on the board, their other tackle, Robert Hainsey, is viewed as like a round 3, round 4 guard center prospect. And one of their guards, Aaron Banks, is viewed as like a round 4 guard prospect. And they're just going to reload. Like their freshman center is better than half those guys. Like it's every year. And we talked earlier about like trusting guys and trusting teams. Yeah. Teams like drafting Notre Dame offensive linemen.
Yeah.
They like drafting Iowa offensive linemen. It usually works.
Yeah. It's a safe bet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to throw one question in from our buddy Femi. Is there anyone with enough arm talent in this like the 6th quarterback that is worth trading into round 1 to get if you miss out on a guy that you covet and you need a quarterback of the future?
I think a team trading up into the 1st round for the 6th quarterback, it will be the biggest mistake of draft week. I would be stunned if it happened. And we're already seeing this happen. The top 5 is really good. And then after the top 5, the drop off is precipitous. It is bad. We could see fewer than 10 quarterbacks go for only the 2nd time this century. It happened in 2015. Yeah. Jameis and Marcus Mariota went 1 and 2. And then the Colorado State kid, whose name I refuse to learn, went like round 3. You know what I mean? Like 75 picks later.
Oh, you're forgetting the EJ Manuel year. That was an all-time bad.
Right, but that had 10 total quarterbacks go.
Oh, did it?
By the time day 3 was done. Yeah. Which no round 1, but they had volume at least. Okay. This year, after those big 5, we're going to see about 4 or 5 go. So we could get under 10. If you're talking yourself into a Davis Mills out of Stanford, Kellen Mond out of Texas A&M, or Kyle Trask out of Florida, you're outside your God-given mind. It's a fine dart throw with pick 75. But if you're trying to trade out for that, you're bonkers.
Okay. I like it. I like good info.
I like that. Yeah. And the Mon thing too, like I liked watching him a little, and then it's like, well, we had some Rona and he kind of had some issues here and there. It's like, wow, when you compare him up against the top 5, it's like, yeah, there's like a tier, and maybe there's no tier 2 or tier 3.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to call a guy developmental when he has 40 starts in the SEC. Eventually you are what you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You don't get the Mitch Trubisky, like, he didn't have a lot of games yet.
That's what they're doing with Davis Mills. Only started 11 games. Yeah. Cause he's injury prone. He can't move in the pocket, brother. Like there's reasons for these things.
I like it. Okay. One final question for you that we didn't prep you for.
Hit me.
After all of this very actionable information and deep insight and like no bullshit, what is the hottest take that you have heading into this draft? And like, it doesn't have to be a hot take, but just like, where are you the furthest off from like the consensus? You know, like everybody is so sure this guy is a 1st round talent. And I'm like, he's never going to make a start, or vice versa. Like people are knocking this guy day 2, day 3. He is clearly top, round 1 talent. Like, is there a general hot take that you have?
Yes. This interior defensive tackle class is generally viewed as bad. I think it's like bad. Like Christian Barmore out of Alabama is apparently going to go top 15, top 20. And man, maybe that reaps for you in year 3, but that's a swing for the fences. Barmore, he had a really nice end to the season. And a lot of times teams like to take that and be like, he's getting better. And it's never that neat. Yeah. Development
against the elite competition.
Yeah. Development is not linear. It never goes that steady. We're not exponential all the way up. And so Barmore spent all of his success at Alabama was being bigger, quicker, faster than the other guy. Guess what you don't get to do in the NFL? At least consistently, measurably for 99% of the guys, just be bigger, quicker, faster. And so you got it's like Quinnen Williams, where like that year 1 with the Jets was rough. And then year 2, he started to put the pieces together. But Barmore was less dominant and less experienced. So how long of an arc are we looking at here? And then after him, Levi Onwuzurike out of Washington, Davian Nixon out of Iowa. And Onwuzurike was out of position. Nixon was a JUCO guy. Yeah, like it's kind of worth a swing. But man, I don't know how early. And so to me, this defensive tackle class is radioactive. I don't want a piece of it.
like
well,
that.
this is good. The next, we're gonna have
I'm
all
giving
these
some
good
teams.
quarterbacks.
I'm gonna do grades.
No
you know what? I'm
interior
doing grades this
pressure.
year.
Like this
giving
is
all
awesome.
Fs for that.
Yeah, we're on the cusp of just a great generation of NFL entertainment. If there's no pass rush,
nobody can rush the passer. Offensive line talent, great
wide receivers.
Wide receivers deep every year, and this quarterback class is great. Let's go. Bet the over, baby. Let's go.
I can't wait. Yeah, the over on average was up like 4 points last year. So why not? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was incredibly fun. Really enjoyed getting into all that process stuff. Hopefully I'm sure everyone listening enjoyed this. There's some actionable bets in here. So thanks again. Where can people find you, and what's some of the stuff that you would point people to as they prepare for their NFL draft handicap?
Yeah, so I'm at Benjamin Solak on Twitter. Solak's SOLAK. The Draft Network is where all the draft stuff lives. Locked on NFL Draft is the podcast 5 days a week. Right now we're doing the Guest Mock series, which is a lot of fun because we bring on beat writer for The Athletic, ESPN, or whatever for each team, grill them about the depth chart, have them make a pick. The pick's mostly for fun. The depth chart stuff is the cool stuff, trying to figure out projections and who's going to get snap counts where. And so we're in the midst of that right now, which is a ton of fun. And then, if you're doing your own mock draft, TDN Mock Draft Simulator. Burn an hour of your workday without even noticing, man. That's a lot of fun. So it's draft season. It's just a good time.
All right. I love it. Well, with that, let's wrap. Good job, Andy.
Night. Yes.
Good job.
Appreciate all the.
Did you make any? Andy, did you make any bets on this podcast?
Not during the podcast.
Are you going to make any
bets? StreamYard slows down your Chrome, dude. Like it's made it harder for me to bet. Like if I'm betting on my phone now. So no, I didn't. I think I'm going to get some Slater in.
I like that one. All right. Well, take care, guys. Right. Best of luck, and thanks again for all your time.
Hit the outro music.
That was like by far our best NFL draft podcast. I got to think.
It's not even the NFL draft week yet, is it?
No. But this will have a good little 2-week shelf life. This is great, man.
I thought it turned out nicely.
Yeah, definitely a lot better than 2 years ago, where I was just like, wow.
I felt like I was nice.
Drew Lock was going to go 4th over